time and his talent, and we obviously quickly took him up on that, but really didn't realize at the time we took him up on that how much time and how much talent we'd be receiving, because I know I have a chance to go to a number of city things, but I dare say John is there at virtually every one of them, and many more, and perhaps not to try to say how many things I go to. It's a number of them, but there are many more that are out there, and I wanted to, along with the rest of the council as well as the community, publicly thank you for what you've done, the hours that you spent, the talent in utilizing your equipment. I know we pay for the supplies, but that's minor in compared to what we receive in return for what you've done, and so I'd like to, at the end of this year, let you know how much we appreciate all of what you've done and continue to do. And I'll make this presentation, but on the back of this, to John Jones, this will go on the back of the, and actually it's a living chronology of a little bit of what you've done, as done by Mr. Smith here in the North Little Rock. No, it's Carol Haynes, excuse me, but his newspaper in the North Little Rock Times, in recognition and appreciation for your dedicated service to the city of North Little Rock, December 27, 2007. I had the opportunity to sign it along with all of our 8 council members, and obviously this was in the North Little Rock Times. It's the story of your actions and activity, and certainly our appreciation for what you've done. But as I mentioned a little earlier, the years and years, as people look back on the time that you spent, they'll have a much more ability to visually see what this city has been involved in than we would have ever had in the past had you not given us all of the time and certainly, again, your talents. John, we're going to keep this and put this on the back. Okay. But then we'll give it to you as soon as we are able to put it on the back. So it's not a gift that we're going to return to us, but we'll put this on the back and make it a part of it, and it'll be something that we hope you remember how much we remember you and the time you're spending with us, John. Thank you very much, and let me ask all of you to join with me. Good, thanks, John.
Thank you. I'd like to say one thing while I'm still up here. It's been a privilege of doing what I've done for the last 100 years. It gives me a chance to get out and meet a lot of people from the city, go to a lot of functions that I normally wouldn't be able to do. And like North Rock Times now, they say, hey, you got any photos of so-and-so? You got any photos of so-and-so? Well, bring them to me. I need them. Different ones is asking for photos, and I'm more than happy to share them with them. But I'd like to say one thing. If it wasn't for the grace of God to give me the strength and the ability to do what I do, I couldn't do this for you. Thank you.
I don't know what we're seeing up there, but it's been pointed out to me that we are having some technical difficulties. Comcast is trying to straighten us out, but we are not currently on air. And were you talking to somebody over there?
Called Joe, and we're evidently on one channel but not another channel, so there's something going on with Comcast that's...
All right, well, 18 and 4, for those of you who are within earshot, are the 2 channels that I understand we're on, 18 and 4. And I would more think that this might be 4 that we're on and 18 that we're not, but that's just somewhat of a guess. So if anybody can hear me but can't see us, if that's the case, those are the 2 channels that we're supposed to be on, 18 and 4, 18 and 4, and so try one or the other, but I'd suggest you try 4 first. We are now into our public hearings, and I understand, wait a minute, another presentation, Alderman Height?
Mr. Wiley, Mr. Tim Wiley of Discount Tire wanted, he originally asked for 30 minutes, I pared it down to 30 seconds. So Mr. Wiley is here tonight and wanted to make a couple of comments.
Thank you, Alderman Height. Mayor Daley and the City Council, we really appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of my brother Rob and me. Mayor Hayes, did I say Mayor Daley? You know, you're a lot better
Mayor
looking.
Stoller would take much offense, but I don't take
Mayor
it.
Hayes, you're a lot better looking, okay? Sorry. We are the owners, along with our families, of Discount Tire and Brake, and we're now finishing construction on a new facility on JFK Boulevard at Curie Drive. And, you know, today in developing anything in a metropolitan area is somewhat challenging. There are many issues that have to be addressed. We want obviously a building, a business to be functional, yet to be pleasing aesthetically to the neighbors, the neighborhood, not cause any problem. And of course, the neighborhood we built in is a very nice neighborhood, so everyone was particularly concerned about that. The aesthetics, environmental impact, traffic flow, noise creation, outdoor lighting, all of these things are rightfully the concern of city officials, and those things we had to discuss and work out with city officials. And we're told by many now, and we ourselves are satisfied that these concerns have been addressed in a good way, thanks to many people helping. And that's really why I wanted to speak for just a minute, because many from the city of Little Rock really helped us and made this project come together. And so we'd really be remiss if we didn't just spend a minute mentioning just a few of those. First of all, not the least of those that helped us was Mayor Hayes. Got it right? And those on the City Council. We really appreciate that help. Also, Mr. Bob Ward, Head of Public Works, Mr. Tim Marvin from Traffic, the Planning Commission, Norman Clifton, Chairman, the Subdivision Committee, chaired by Mr. Jerry Phillips, Mr. Terry Hartwick from the Chamber of Commerce also helped us put things together, and Mr. Jim Briley in planning and others in planning were very helpful also. There are many others, but they're going to put the hook on me if I single them all out, and so there are many others we can't mention, but I would really be remiss if I didn't take just a second and thank two men that went above and beyond, and that's Mr. Charlie Height and Mr. Murray Witcher, who represent Ward 4. In our opinion, my brother Rob and mine, we think they went above and beyond really the call of duty in helping us put this together, and they worked extremely hard, and they met with different people from the different departments of the city. Actually, they got out of their office and went on the job site, and we really appreciated that, and we think they did a tremendous job of blending the concerns of their constituents, the neighbors there that live close, and been working with various departments and enabled this new business to develop and help the city grow, but yet to help us deliver a facility and business that would be a credit not only to the neighborhood but to the city as a whole. So again, Rob and I, my brother, thank all for the help in the city, and we look forward to being a good business there for the city. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate it, and we look forward to that sales tax starting to come in, too. Thank you all very much, and we are noticed the progress of the building and are looking forward to the opportunity for your services to be enjoyed by our citizens. Next item is public hearings. The first one is reconvening a public hearing on the dumpster and dumpster enclosures. That's regarding 07-124, and that's Alderman Gaines' legislation. I'll go ahead and open the floor for public hearing if anyone wants to comment on that. We're taking those comments. Please state your name, and I'm told by Miss Whitby, that I need to continue to remind people to fill out their cards. If you intend to speak either before, during, or after, please fill out a card so we can get the proper spelling of the name, proper address if we need to contact you, telephone number, and we and she would appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Scott Miller. I live at 214 West 5th Street, downtown. I spoke last week about our last council meeting, and I appreciate your time and patience. I have been complaining to anybody who would listen for 2 years about dumpsters. Mr. Wadley's probably had more phone calls than anybody from me, Mr. Voiles. And I have gone through a metamorphosis, if you will, a journey of dumpsters around the city. I used to think we needed very specific laws, very specific ordinances requiring certain things in all cases, and I've come to learn that every dumpster practically is its own case. Just like the Planning Commission went through a metamorphosis, if you will, or a journey in getting this ordinance to where it is right now. What this ordinance is not a requirement for all dumpsters to be enclosed. It is not a requirement for doors on all dumpsters. It's not a requirement for dumpster enclosures on 3 sides. What it is a wonderful piece of legislation that gives a tremendous amounts of discretion to administrative officer, who then can make a case-by-case decision on what screening is necessary for that specific site at the lowest cost and still accomplish the public good and the public need. I actually think it's one of the best ordinances that this city's looked at in a long, long time. I know there was some concern about 2 minor amendments I asked for in the last council meeting regarding a time frame for making a decision by the administrative officer, as well as recognizing the historic district review of the legislative historic districts we have downtown. There was some discussion about possibly sending that back to the Planning Commission. I would urge you to reconsider that and not do that. Those are very, very minor, certainly much less minor impact on the neighborhood than what you did with the home business ordinance in amending it at your last meeting, changing the number of vehicles and things like that. You know, certainly you can do this, and it's a very minor change. It really doesn't impact any of the administration of this ordinance. And I'd just like to emphasize, it is a well-written ordinance. I would go back to, and this may be a little bit cliche-ish, but I'll go back to the original amendments, if you will, the Bill of Rights and other things that are very smartly crafted around generalizations. The Congress shall make no law, and I'm abridging here, abridging the freedom of speech or press, but yet we've managed to find our way through laws that don't allow us to yell fire in a theater, don't allow us to do things that create public damage and other things. As long as we have appeals processes through the Board of Adjustments, through the circuit courts, these things work out in time, and I will put my faith in the public and these boards and these citizens rather than be-all and catch-all 28-page ordinances. That's why I urge you to vote for this ordinance, because it gives the discretion to deal with them on a case-by-case basis and work our way through those issues with the 2 amendments I've actually asked you to suggest, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Any other comments? Alderman Bryant?
Yeah, I've had some calls from people who have apartment complexes in residential areas that provide a dumpster for their residents versus allowing them to take and put 20 or 15 garbage cans out on the street to either be picked up or be dispersed or something. And I think we need to have something in this ordinance that would allow, if they can't enclose the dumpster, then we need to have some exception or some review process that these folks can go through to allow them to continue having these dumpsters versus putting all these trash cans on the street. And I think the city attorney has talked to the same people I have, and I think he has some ideas about what we can do with it.
One of the things, let me just go ahead, but one of the things I understand Alderman Gaines can comment on this, and we can certainly talk about this in just a minute. It's on the agenda, but I understand Alderman Gaines may not call it for a vote tonight and intends to try to deal with it next year. So, we can certainly listen to the city attorney. Right now, we're in public comment, so if we could get those comments out of the way, and then we'll kind of discuss how we might frame deciding on the potential amendments and being aware of them. Mr. Ard?
Good evening. I've had several businessmen, they do not choose to come down here and speak, but they have some concerns, and they didn't bother to get a copy of the ordinance. So in some cases, they're not sure what they're talking about, but they have called their dumpster pickup people, and they get the impression if they had to put the fences all the way around and maybe put some type of hinge on it and they had to get out of the truck and open it, then they're going to be charged extra. It is a good ordinance, but if they don't enforce it any better than the first one of our council members brought up, where you have to keep them closed, it's not going to do a bit of good. There's dumpsters out there all over, and a council member got an ordinance passed, they need to be closed. they don't enforce it. So if they don't enforce it any better than they do that one, it's not going to do a bit of good. Y'all have a happy new year.
Thank you, Mr. Ard. You too. Microphone's still open.
I was going to say, I've had some of the same calls too that concern some elderly people, different ones, and also some of the property owners don't have really good places to put those dumpsters. They only have one or two places they can. So that's been one of their concerns that they've called me about anyway.
Ms. Ross, did you have something? Alderman Height. I tell you what, let me just go ahead and see if there's anybody else that wants to make any comments, and then I'll go ahead and either recess or adjourn this public hearing. Well, we'll adjourn it. And if no one else coming to the microphone, I'll go ahead and consider this item, this public hearing adjourned. With that, we just have some general discussion. We'll go ahead and with Alderman Gaines' permission, go ahead and deal with this piece of legislation while we've got it in front of us. So we'll just put it on the table for discussion. Alderman Height.
Okay, since Sean is here representing planning tonight, can you come to the microphone just a second? I attended one of the Planning Commission meetings where y'all discussed this ordinance, and it was my knowledge that one of the companies that service the dumpsters was in attendance to that meeting.
Yes.
But subsequent meetings, were there any representatives from any of the other companies that attended the Planning Commission meetings where y'all discussed this ordinance? And if so, did they have any opposition, or did y'all work out any of their concerns?
I think a gentleman was it BFI, came to the first meeting, our first public hearing, and he was invited back to come to the next two, and he never came back to the next two, and we didn't have anybody in the audience.
The gentleman from Waste Management was at the meeting that I attended.
Okay, yeah, well, Waste Management then.
Right. And I think his concern was the same, that some of the businesses, he was going to have to pass on the increased rates if the businesses were forced to enclose their dumpsters with four sides, including a gate, and that the time that it took to service that dumpster was going to be, in some cases, doubled, and they were going to have to pass those charges on to those businesses. That seemed to be his major concern.
Correct.
Yeah. And is it my understanding that this ordinance is going to be on a case-by-case basis, and existing dumpsters are not necessarily going to have to fall under the rules and regulations of this ordinance? Is that correct?
There'll be a one-year grace period that will give staff time on a case-by-case look at the existing dumpsters and either decide, to build a wall or enclosure or even landscaping that could solve the problem. And then the Planning Commission for the last 3 or 4 years have been any new dumpster comes in with a new building have been enclosing them.
Now, I know we've discussed this at 2 other council meetings, and both times we asked Mr. Vols to invite any representatives from the companies that service those dumpsters. Do you know if those invitations did go out?
I know he did talk to him, but it was one of the first, the first time he asked over a month ago. So I'm not sure what the response back was. Well, obviously, no one showed up.
No one's here tonight, to my knowledge, so, okay. Thank you, Mayor.
I guess I had one question.
Yes, sir.
They have 1 year, you say, to get in compliance, is what you're saying?
There'd be 1 year for, yes.
Compliance to what? This ordinance we're looking at?
To come in to have some sort of screening, or to be decided that screening is not needed at all.
So the Planning Commission has already made that determination then of the screening and that type of thing?
The Planning Commission reviewed this ordinance.
But the Planning Commission has not made no one, maybe I'm misunderstanding your question, but no one has made any determinations about any of the existing dumpsters as to whether or not they would require screening or whether they'd be exempt from screening.
But the Planning Commission is recommending that they
That's
do
correct.
that
That's
they make
correct.
these restrictions to it.
That's correct.
Correct. We had 3 public hearings over a 3-month period on this issue.
While you're up there, this is a totally different topic, but I know that the council directed that the Planning Commission look into railroad crossings, if I'm not mistaken, and try to determine which one of those crossings we might be willing to close down, if any. Are you aware of that?
It will be discussed at the next subdivision committee.
Okay, so it is being pursued. I just wanted to make sure that we checked and made sure that it was being pursued by the planning commission.
Yes, it's on the agenda for, I think it's January 24th.
Okay? Anything else? Thank you very much. Any other council member? I know Alderman Gaines, if you want to just go ahead and call that, Ms. Whitby, I think he might want to hold it, but I'll let him speak for himself.
This is an ordinance amending ordinance number 7697, the zoning ordinance, to add section 12.24 dumpsters and dumpster enclosures, third and final reading.
Okay, and
Yeah, we do want to hold it one more time.
all right. All right, now, the next item is home occupations. That's 07127. I think that this has been before this council a couple times. This has to deal with the day spa in the western part of our city to try to refresh your recollections. Initially there was a rezone. Mr. Carter, if you want to just briefly explain the legislation, but as I recall, and feel free to contradict or add to, is that what this legislation does, and we'll go ahead and call this after the public hearing, is essentially expand the definition of an R1 zone and permissible uses for home occupations, and therefore does not change any zoning classification, and that was my understanding. You want to add to, subtract from?
Well, that's correct. I think you've summarized it pretty well. I did have one comment that I'd like to make after I'd met with Sean about this today. One of the issues that we were concerned about is I know at one point, I guess we had an amendment at the last meeting where we said reduce the number from no more than 4 people to no more than 2 people.
That's correct.
And the concern is that previous to this being considered, prior to this being considered, when someone was, say, watching kids in a neighborhood, watching neighborhood kids, it's not generating traffic, it's a permissible home business. Planning had taken the administrative position that 4 was an okay number. So before that, we'd gone down this road administratively, we'd kind of taken that position as a city. So if we go to 2, then while we might seek to expand the definition of acceptable home business, we may actually in this be reducing what we've otherwise authorized. So that's just something that I want you to consider. I know that right now we're at 2 people, but administratively in the past we've said 4.
Well, and I know the Alderman Height, I think that was your amendment, if I'm not mistaken, and the council certainly has the opportunity to deal with that as we bring this before the council, but you're right. I don't know that we were aware that we were actually changing a general approach. Maybe Alderman Height was, but
I wasn't aware of it. I would have brought it up last time, Mayor. I wasn't aware of it.
all right. Well, that just sort of frames the issue. Did you want to say something?
Well, I thought we had I remember us amending that from 4 to 2, but wasn't it, there's some discussion that it was based on the number of vehicles, how many people, and we thought it was 4 per automobile.
Originally, we'd said 1 vehicle at the address at a time and no more than 4 people. And then we went from 1 vehicle to 2 because people are coming and going and we didn't want to be nitpicky with folks. And, but then I think that was unrelated to the issue of how many people were there. So in other words, we expanded the number of vehicles at the same time as we reduced the number of customers.
Let's do the public hearing, and maybe the council might be interested in dealing with that when we bring it up. With that, let me open the floor for public hearing and comment on the amending of the zoning ordinance regarding home occupations. Anyone care to speak to that? Going once, going twice. I'll adjourn the public hearing and ask Ms. Whitby, would you please read that?
This is an ordinance amending section 12.4 of ordinance number 7697, the zoning ordinance regarding home occupations, third and final reading.
I have a question.
Alderwoman Ross?
There's just one amendment that I'd like to make, and I think Jason has it written up for me.
Okay. let me get a motion for adoption before we, motion made, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, now it's right.
Okay. Jason?
What Alderman Ross discussed with me earlier is to clarify adding a section F that would state the authority to operate a home occupation shall not be interpreted to waive any law or regulation of the city, state, or federal government relating to the operation of a business, including without limitation, I've got all this, I can hand you, Diane, you don't have to scribble on it. Including without limitation, privilege licenses, facility licenses, professional certificates, inspections, and similar requirements. The concept being that just because you're doing something in your home, if you're otherwise required to have a license, then you have to have that license.
Is there a motion to adopt that amendment?
Makes sense?
A motion made and
Oh,
seconded.
it doesn't make sense to me.
Any further discussion?
It doesn't make sense.
Excuse me? Oh.
It doesn't make sense. I'm asking.
Okay. In other words, say an attorney had an office at his home where he's practicing some kind of law practice where he doesn't have much client interaction, so he's just going to have an office in his home. That doesn't mean that he doesn't have to have a law license. He still has to have a law license. It doesn't mean he doesn't have to have a privilege license. He still has to have a privilege license. To the extent that he has to charge sales tax, he still has to do that. He has to comply with other governmental regulations just like he normally would. He can't avoid those regulations just by virtue of having his office in his house. I could only see that. The only thing that comes to mind too is that if someone had, watching kids, what's the requirement with DHS? I don't know exactly what the number of children is at the cutoff, but I think it's 4. I think if you're beyond
It is
4, then you
4.
have to have, right, then you have to have facility inspection, you have to be certified and all that kind of stuff.
This is, I mean, as I see it, and I would certainly support it, this is, our laws can't supersede, we're the lowest rung on the ladder, so everybody else pretty well can do things that we still have to comply with, but it certainly makes it clear to any person who operates under this that this does not give them anything other than the right to operate in their home. So I think it's a good amendment, and it clarifies, to everyone, including the applicant, that, that they've got to do everything else they got to do. This just gives them the right to operate in their home.
And I don't have a problem with that. I guess we're going to have to come back because there are a lot of home businesses out there. So we're going to, what we're going to do, we're going to grandfather everyone else that's out there that has a home business.
Every home business that's out there is supposed to be complying with this already. If they're not, then they're not in compliance with our city code.
Okay.
Because really, that's a reflection of our legal position that we've had. If somebody's running a business out of their home, then they should still have their licenses.
I'm the piano teacher as well.
The main
Okay.
reason this was brought up was when we added the therapy, I just want to make sure that they are licensed therapists. I mean, just because you can operate out of your home, you still need a license. And it's a license that they normally should have anyway. This is just to clarify.
Any further discussion on the amendment? I'm sorry.
Well, just a question, I just wonder, have any of y'all heard from anybody about this, yay or nay?
Certainly not on the amendment, but,
on this legislation. Has anybody, I haven't heard from anybody.
Of
Concern.
course, this legislation was prompted by the rights. That's the conflict that kind of brought the whole issue to light.
Well, the
I've been in
reason-
communication with their attorney about it. Their attorney, of course, endorsed
The
it.
original legislation had to do with rezoning.
And it's not a rezone.
That's gone.
Right.
let's go ahead and get this amendment, and then we can put it on on the motion to amend.
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
And Witcher?
Yes.
Now, does anybody want to clarify the number that was raised by the city attorney, or anything else for that matter? We're back on the main motion as amended, or the main legislation.
Yeah, I sure want to be fair with Alderman Hyatt. There were 60 people that signed saying it was okay in the neighborhood, but there were 2 people against it, but they lived quite a ways back. I heard from them.
That was the rezoning, though, they were against.
Well, they're still, yes, that was the rezoning. That's what they were
This
against.
doesn't have anything to
They
do
didn't
with
do the
rezoning.
No.
All right, any council member want to do anything on the number from 2 to 4?
I want to hear from Mr. Carter again about the number of 2 or 4.
The concern about reducing the number from 4 to 2 is that we've previously administratively taken the position that 4 people present in a home occupation is okay. And we're concerned that if we reduce this number to 2, that we're gonna have to go back to the people who we've said that's okay, and we got to tell them that's not okay anymore.
So for how many years have we allowed 4?
I can't tell you how many years we've done it. I just know that we've done it.
Okay, so this is not something new. I mean, the number 4 has been in the zone, in the regulations for quite some time.
Administratively, that's, you can look at other laws, just like the DHS rules and other rules that are out there, that they say generally home-based occupations, 4 people is an okay number.
I guess what we got a lady that does a little beauty operation in her home. She's got 3 chairs, and has been doing it for 30 years or 3 years. And after this goes into effect, even though it was okay before, she won't be okay now. Is
Are
that?
beauty shops allowed? Are beauty shops allowed as a home business?
No.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Thinking his head, no, I don't know.
Pick one then that is.
We need Sean up here. He's the one.
Sean, you want to come on up?
Mayor, if I can, we're dealing with a number of vehicles, not with a number of customers.
No, we are dealing with a number of customers.
Customers.
Well,
It's down, further
it says
down.
customers' vehicles, it doesn't say customers.
You may have the previous.
In the section 2,
Section 2.4
Okay,
refers to instructing
2 to 4, okay.
no more than 4
Sorry.
or 2 people, or teaching no more than 2, or tutoring no more than 2.
Okay, who wants to, we were going to ask Sean. All right, give us an example of something that's allowed now, and we allow 4 customers before this.
The daycare is a perfect example. Any daycare, 5 or more, goes to Planning Commission, City Council for approval. And I have at least 15 to 20 4 or less daycares that are sponsored by DHS, have approval from DHS, do have a business license, but did not go to Planning Commission or City Council for approval. So it's a daycare for 4 kids or less. And we've been using this statement, number 4 there, using that to allow someone babysitting 4 kids.
I can understand that one.
Okay.
Well, I hope you can understand the.
Well, beauty parlor.
Even though they can't use them, that was maybe a bad example, but.
That'd go for tutoring.
Let me try again then for an amendment in section 2, number 4, in place of 2, which has been on the revised 12-10-07, place the number 4.
Second.
There is a second. On the, do you want to discuss the amendment?
Oh, well, what are you changing?
For the number.
We're going back to 4.
Number of individuals, not number of cars.
Changing it back to 4?
Yes.
Can we
4
not
kids.
just make an exception for daycare for 4 and leave the rest at 2?
Then we have to make an no,
Let's just make it 4.
let's make it 4.
Right now, there's a motion that Alderman Witcher's been moved and seconded. Anybody want to discuss the motion from 2 to 4? On the motion.
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
And Witcher?
Yes.
Now do we have a motion?
How about move for adoption as well?
Second.
On
I just had
discussion?
I just had one question. I know that this was denied by the Planning Commission. Has it gone back and met all these requirements we're asking now, or have they seen it since we've?
If I remember, it wasn't
I can
denied.
tell you.
by
It wasn't
the
denied.
Planning
That was the
Commission.
rezone.
Sean, you want,
I can tell you, it was denied by the Planning Commission, the rezone was denied. The only problem that they had with qualifying as a home-based occupation was vehicular traffic. They have one person who drives over there, and previously our home-based occupation said, no cars, period, no cars. So that's the amendment that's being proposed. They could still accomplish their business if a car is allowed.
But it never went back to Planning Commission, just?
No.
Okay.
on the motion.
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
No.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
And Witcher?
Yes.
On the emergency, Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
And Witcher?
Yes.
Let's go ahead and, I know we've got a public hearing on the budget, and we'll get into that in just a second, but let me go ahead and ask Ms. Whitby to publish the special call. We'll get that done.
Yes, sir. This is a letter dated December 20th, 2007. Honorable members of the City Council regarding special council meeting. Dear members of the City Council, this is to advise that we have called a special council meeting of the North Little Rock City Council for 7:05 p.m. on December 27, 2007 at City Hall Council Chambers, North Little Rock, Arkansas. The following will be on the agenda. Number one, an ordinance waiving formal bidding requirements for installation of polyurethane flotation foam into the MV Patriot, motor vessel Patriot, declaring an emergency and for other purposes, sponsored by Mayor Patrick H. Hayes, respectfully submitted Patrick H. Hayes, and it is signed by 8 council members.
Would you read the ordinance?
Yes, sir.
This is an ordinance waiving formal bidding requirements for installation of polyurethane flotation foam into the MV Patriot. First reading.
Move to suspend the rules, place on the second. Let's get her up there and then talk about it briefly, if it's all right.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
On the motion?
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
And Witcher?
Yes.
This is an ordinance waiving formal bidding requirements for installation of a polyurethane flotation foam into the MV Patriot. Second reading.
Move to suspend the rules, place on third reading.
Second.
On the motion?
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
And Witcher?
Yes.
An ordinance waiving formal bidding requirements for installation of polyurethane flotation foam into the MV Patriot. Third and final reading.
Let me just briefly explain this. Captain Lump, you want to come to the microphone? As you know, the city acquired the Patriot several years ago, 3 maybe, and used to be Gators. Gators. It used to be Gators, and did some significant remodeling. We've been working with Captain Lump and the Arkansas Queen, which, you know, is, we're proud to say is in-house, and hopefully the river will stay at a manageable level. We all experienced some downs this summer, but the Patriot, as we periodically take a look at it, had taken on some water. Now there's about, I don't know, without showing a diagram, there's about 10 or 12 different compartments under the Patriot. And while the ones that have been noticed to have some risk are on the outside, generally the outside of the vessel. I was approached initially by, Mike Smith and the Public Works Department, and indicated they had some real serious concerns because there was some leakage that were going on in several of those tanks. We brought Captain Lump involved, became involved, and we tried to determine what would be the most prudent way to deal with this in the most economical way. And I know that the captain has very extensive experience in the maritime industry, and to bring y'all back just a little bit in terms of history, I first met Bob Lump when he was recommended as someone to do a survey to try to recruit a boat come here, and that was to partner with Little Rock. After he got here, he saw what we feel like is great potential, and rather than go forward on that, he brought his boat, so to speak, here. So we're very concerned, obviously, about the float worthiness of our vessel, and to do it in a prudent way. And while we don't think she'll sink in the morning, it's not something we want to believe, share with you as being imminent. There is a concern, and that concern needs to be addressed in a timely way, because if we don't deal with this, you sure don't want it to sink the day before you were going to deal with something like this. So again, I don't want to try to raise a red flag. Perhaps, a reasonable shade of orange might be more appropriate. And we went out, and I'll let him add too, to try to determine the most effective and cost-effective way to do this. And this foaming approach came on the scene, and there is we've only found one person that really has a traveling operation that can do this and can do it, sometime in January, and that's why I brought it to you now, because we wanted to try to see if we could meet that timetable. The cost is, we're having some benefit to cost because there's another need locally that might also combine with us in bringing this operation to town. And so, again, I don't want us to go down and start throwing, life preservers, out there to the Patriot, but we sure don't want to waste time. And we don't think that there's, very much competition for this kind of service, if any, and we don't want to wait any longer than what we have to right now. Captain, you want to go ahead and add to or subtract from that?
Yes, Paul Hastings is a person you all know, very capable on the river here, and he has a deck barge in a much more severe condition than the Patriot, and as it worked out after we talked to the mayor and to Public Works, there was a meeting in New Orleans called the Workboat Show, which the entire marine industry attends, and Paul and I went down there. We had no fun in New Orleans at all. We worked the whole time we were there. But we did talk to a number of marine builders, shipbuilders, people that we knew, and many of them do foaming in construction. People that build fishing boats foam the holes so that they will be insulated. There's a company in Monticello, Arkansas that puts a band, a bumper around it, and they foam those. But we were able to find nobody that did any foaming outside of their factory. And through the Passenger Vessel Association, I did find a company, Maxwell Marine, that has been working in the field for about 20 years. A friend of mine in Cincinnati, Ohio, has used him, and he came highly recommended. Mark Maxwell is the gentleman's name. He came down here and surveyed and took a look at the situation on the Patriot and for that deck barge. And to my knowledge, he's the only one, at least east of the Rockies, that does this. And I think what this is primarily a pretty prudent insurance policy.
One of the things that we were also told, to make sure that everybody's aware that this, the expected life of this, effort is somewhere at least in the neighborhood of 20 years or better. Alderman?
Yeah, is this a Coast Guard approved method to pump this into these vehicles? Does the Coast Guard?
Well, neither the deck barge nor the Patriot are governed by the Coast Guard because neither one carries passengers for hire. I wouldn't do this on a moving boat.
Okay.
Because once you do it, you restrict some of your compartmentation inspection. The Patriot has, I may be wrong, 12 compartments down each side and a major center compartment. And the center compartment's in pretty good shape. These are the side compartments. So under the circumstances, there really are two alternatives. One is to use this flotation foam or at a given time, take this to a dry dock. The nearest dry dock that would hold the Patriot is in Greenville, and then you would do an overplating, and we're talking about something that is really very expensive. I think this is the most cost-effective way to get yourself the assurance of maybe 15, 20, 25 years life out of it.
Okay, thank you.
Questions? All right, do I have a motion to adopt on third and final?
So moved.
Is there a second? On the motion?
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Pass.
Robinson? Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
And Witcher?
Yes.
On the emergency, Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Pass.
Robinson? Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
And Witcher?
Yes.
Okay, Mr.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go to the budget, if I could. Mr. Sisson, you want to come to the microphone? I think y'all heard us. We filed it the last of November. And I'll just make some general comments, and Mr. Sisson can make any comments, and then any council member have any questions, and then we'll open it to public comment. I'd intend to call the budget for the council consideration after the public comments would be the game plan. So, generally speaking, this budget is a little less than 3% increase over last year.
That's correct.
We are not projecting any rate increase for our electric department. We did significantly increase the hydro expected revenue out of the hydro, and just for your information, as of today, or as of midnight last night, we are now $3,400,000 above the projected budget for a total, which projected budget was 5.6. So 3.4 and 5.6 is, however, $9 million.
Yes.
And so the expected revenue from the hydro plant, I think, is a little over $12 million, if I can recall from memory. And we went back and took a look at an average year and really tried to base that on what was reasonably expected. Obviously, that is one key component of the electric department's budget. Let me remind the council that we went from roughly 20% of the city's revenue was a transfer from the electric department, and this year we went from that 20% figure down to less than 10, a significant reduction as we are operating under this year's budget. And essentially what we tried to do, if I can speak for the council in general, is wean ourselves from the dependency on the electric department. We did so, at least in my mind, so that we could minimize the rate increase that we would have otherwise had to do. And while 38% is a big gulp, I might note that our sister city, Benton, had to raise their rates, I believe, 53%, and they're basically under the same contract that we're under. So no rate increase is expected, although there is some dependency on an elevated income from the hydro plant. We are going to bring to the council at the next meeting the authorization for your consideration and hopefully approval to borrow up to $15 million. That is in case the hydro plant or for some reason our rate structure does not perform like we feel like it will, and yet we are cautiously optimistic that we might not have to use that money. If we do, we are hopeful that it will be during the summer when our cash flow may be more of an issue than what we think will be the long-term income for 08 from the hydro plant. So that's just a bit of the picture on that. As we've transcended from a strong dependency, we went, I think, for a high somewhere between $14 and $15 million in transfer, now down to somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 to $6 million in that one-year period. There are no raises except for cost of living raises in this budget. I am certainly committed at the end of the year to take a look, and it's my goal by sometime in perhaps February or early March, if not sooner, but I think realistically it'll be in February or March, to try to find a raise somewhere between 2 and 3% that I would recommend to the council, and recommend how we would achieve that. You're looking at somewhere, I guess, Mr. Sisson, what's 1%?
$300,000.
So, we'll be looking for somewhere in the neighborhood of, and that's on an annual basis, and so depending on when we start it, we would be looking for somewhere upwards close to $900,000. And, we've got a few thoughts that we'll see what the council's reaction to as we move into next year, depending on, what we do with this year's budget. There are, generally, it's pretty much of a hold your own. We are beginning, as was reflected in today's Times, an effort to bring a fire station to the east side. We're continuing with and going to make a real effort this year, although we've been talking about it for several years, to try to find a way to quieten one, perhaps two railroad crossings. We are recommending, as you're aware, of moving forward on the shops at North Hills, as well as the Barron Cross, Lower Barron Cross projects, and I'll be happy to answer any questions as we get into the budget in the discussion stage on either of those, and bring you up to date on what the most recent I have heard in terms of the shops at North Hills. Other than that, there's an entree.
I think, as Mayor, you said cost of living. Step and grade raises are included.
Did I say cost of living? I meant
we
step
do.
and
We
grade.
do not have a cost of living, but step and grade raises are included. That's all.
All right. You want to add anything, Mr.
I don't think so,
Sisson?
Mayor. I think that takes care of everything.
Does any council member want to make any, having quick questions before we open it to public comment? And that, we're remembering, we're going to get into discussion on this here in just a minute, just as soon as we take public comment.
Always.
All right. Mr. Sisson will be around. Thank you, Mr. Sisson. With that introduction, let me go ahead and open the floor to public comment. The microphone's open. Let me again remind you of Ms. Whitby's request, and that is a comment card. With that, the microphone's open.
I was just wondering, did y'all put anything in your budget for our council members? They do a great job. They are underpaid. And was there anything in the budget that they might get a little raise?
Not that I'm aware of, Mr. Ard. Microphone's still open.
I'm not aware of any either, Mayor.
Well, we agree with you, Mr. Ard. Microphone's open. Going once. Going twice. Okay, going to adjourn the public hearing on the budget. Ms. Whitby, would you please read the legislation?
Yes, sir.
This is an ordinance adopting a budget for the 2008 fiscal year for the city of North Little Rock. This is the third and final reading.
All right, we're open for discussion. Let me again remind everyone that, that we, and I didn't ask Mr. Sisson to go back and take a look at the number of times we amended it. I know we're going to deal with amending the existing budget here in a few minutes when we get to it, but I want to again point out that this is simply a working document that we can take a look at, on regular meetings at least 24 times. And we are going to deal with the existing budget one more time tonight, and so it's a guidepost with respect to the items, many of the items in the budget, and I'll point to a couple that I certainly, I know we make a practice of, and that's whether we're required to or not. But let's just take the two items that we're recommending to the council for the Lower Barron Cross as well as the shops at North Hills. Those, if I can remind everyone, that money was set aside. We were victorious in the use tax lawsuit, about 3 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, 3 to 4 years ago. That was one-time money in terms of that success. And we put that aside, then we've added to it at least once, maybe twice, of money in our capital that came from our capital account. So that's one-time money that started at the capital part of the capital penny or capital half penny, and now is a capital quarter penny, was used to add to that. There's somewhere a little bit over $2.5 million in there right now. So the two main additions were, as Bob nodded, two times we added to that through capital money, and it was started by one-time money when we were victorious on the use tax lawsuit. Obviously, there's been some interest accumulation that has, gone back into that, and so, over the years, that's how that money was accumulated. And we actually, when we put it in the budget, there is a specific legislation that addresses that, can only be spent by essentially the council authorization. Even though we put it in the budget, I would again indicate to the council that when we come to enter into any contracts or to do any work or anything that would have any consequential draw, and you've given me the authority last time to do things over or up to 20,000. I'd certainly put it at that limit, even maybe less than that, but certainly over that, I would intend to come to the council, whether we're required to or not, and ask for authorization when we spend any dollars, should you approve this budget. We do make a regular practice of that in terms of maybe making sure that the council and the community is informed, again, as this is somewhat of just a working budget, as it does indicate direction and priorities. Let me just mention, before we go into discussion, as we're talking about those two items, one of the things I want to make clear, at least in my mind, the Lower Barren Cross project goes a lot further than simply assisting one development, although that development will be a benefactor. The two items that I have looked at in terms of supporting financially, and this has been recommended for some time by our traffic services, and Mr. Marvin's here, in terms of enhanced traffic ability to get around in that lower intersection, Lower Barren Cross, where Pike Avenue, 4th Street, East Broadway, Riverfront Drive, all of those come together, and MetroPlan has indicated in our city that's probably one of two, I think it's two, of our most difficult areas to traverse. So that roundabout, will provide for an opportunity for people to continuously, go through that intersection and to come out wherever of those different roadways that they would like to come. So in my mind, anybody on the western part of our city that traverses Pike Avenue going back and forth to Little Rock or, wherever, will benefit by that enhanced ability to traverse through that part of our city. The second thing is to work toward extending 9th Street, which will be a new, we'll say, main avenue to access the back part of the real estate that now pretty much borders the river. We have ending, with our own quarry operation back there, and we've had a number of people that have been interested in doing things there, and I think there'll be an opportunity for us to consider, whether or not we want to agree with one of those and even sell that property. Just to give you a little idea, we purchased that property 6 years ago or thereabouts for somewhere in the neighborhood of $400,000. We recently had an appraisal on that real estate, and if there are no further extension of utilities, which is water and wastewater, the value of that real estate now is pegged at somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 million. If there are utilities extended to it, water and wastewater, then that value goes up to somewhere between $4 and $5 million. So we've had a fairly significant increase, and that extension of 9th Street would very much help with the ability to access that property. In addition to what I call the horse farm, which is owned by Pine Bluff Sand and Gravel, there's a significant tract of land that is also available for future development. And then in addition to the propane or the gas operation, as well as, the Rockwater Village facility. And then in addition to that, it'll allow us to close a portion of the roadway along River Road that will then become more utilized without traffic interference by our trail, which continues to get more and more use and enjoyment. So, while those two projects do no doubt benefit Rockwater Village, they also, in my mind, at least with the roundabout, benefit the entire western part of the city, or anybody that traverses that intersection, and then the extension of 9th Street will benefit all of those, all of that area as we try to move with further opportunities to build our city along the river. Now, back to the shops at North Hills. The developer is still very committed to going forward. We all know that about 10, 12 days ago, maybe longer, second lawsuit was filed to challenge the Corps of Engineers issuing the 404 fill permit. And we are very hopeful. This council passed a resolution at our last meeting supporting the city attorney's office being involved in that up to intervention. Obviously the concern is the delay, and we're hopeful that this can be resolved within the near future, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months. And the developers remain committed to going forward. Somewhere in the neighborhood of Mr. Sisson, and I don't want to flip through the budget, but we're somewhere in the neighborhood of 50% or better in terms of revenue from sales tax, if I'm not mistaken. And I know that we increased our projections on income a little bit because of the new Walmart that'll be coming online in February or March, I believe, of this next year. We have the #1 grossing Walmart on East McCain, and we're looking forward to some of our friends from Maumelle shopping at our new Walmart out on Maumelle Boulevard and helping us with in some respects with that. But this shopping complex is estimated to be able to generate somewhere between $200 and $300 million a year in gross sales, and at that rate, we should receive somewhere between $2 and $3 million, or they're 1 penny, and obviously if this community should support anything else, it would multiply by that. So, while this council has made no commitment, the only commitment that I indicated is that I would try to work with the developer and the council to do as much of the off-site road work that was possible. And the one main thing that we've been working on for the highway department was a access coming south on 167 that would access North Hills, and that project initially was going to be $6 million. Now it's up in the $9 million frame. I've told the developer I have no idea what we can do or whether we'll do anywhere close to that, but that I would try to work with them and the council in doing whatever we felt was overall in our best interest. And so these two projects, I think are really the beginning of what may be a continuation of a lot of opportunities that we'll have and will continue to have. So those are a couple comments. There are other things in there. There, obviously a few increases of one nature or the other. Mostly, as you can see, when our 2.7% went up, those, are in the few thousands of dollars rather than any significant numbers. I'll certainly be happy to work with the council, as we always are in any way as we move forward in trying to deal with the demands. The salaries are really the largest that at this point are looming. I know there's other things that we want to do in terms of drainage or other projects that we might have. And so, the one thing that I would underline is certainly my feeling we've been able to do a lot because of being able to work together, and that would continue to be my commitment. With that, the floor is open for discussion.
My biggest concern on this is that we are not budgeting money for the salary increases. I know that this is a working budget, but I still think that we should have that in the budget.
Well, at this point, if we can, and that's $900,000 if we were going to do 3%, and at this point, I've got a few ideas, and we may see very well what we might have as we pass over to next year. I know that in the 19 budgets that I've now had part of both living under and preparing, I'd say about half the time, we really haven't dealt with that until we get into the year. So this is not unusual. We've done it both ways, and at this point, I've got a thought about how to come up with some of that, but I'm certainly not at this point ready to recommend it to you.
Well, under the special projects fund on the North Hills, the $2 million, that's just an estimate. We're just putting that money there, right, on the $2 million. If we reduce that to like $1.5 million and move the $500 over to the employee raises, that would be a 3% raise in June. would it not?
Yeah, I could not support that because that money, first of all, that money is one-time money and it won't be there next year. And that 3%, I certainly don't want to be in a position, and under the legislation, I mean, we'd have to change that ordinance that we adopted when we created the Special Projects Fund. Because that's supposed to go for capital stuff. Now, we could do it, obviously, so I'm not going to sit here and argue to say that we couldn't. But I would oppose doing that because it's one-time money, and I know I've never recommended budgeting one-time money for salaries that are going to come about on an annual basis.
But if we do it in April, don't we have to come up with the money the next year anyway?
Absolutely.
So I'm confused on that one.
Well, capital money, what I'm saying is one of the
I mean,
things...
can that not go back into operations? The interest portion on that, can that not go back into operations, the $500,000? Could we not move
Well, we could have done anything with interest. I think if I'm not mistaken, we traditionally always put the interest accumulation into the account that it is generated from. Now, could we do something different? I'm sure we could.
So we could take that and put that over in operations for
Well,
salaries.
but I mean, again, I'm not going to support doing anything with capital money or even the interest accumulated, because once that capital money's gone, then that interest won't accumulate for next year either. So once we spend it, that interest is not going to be around for the following year to do that. So I'm sorry, but I'm just going to oppose, doing anything with either the interest that's generated or the capital money that's one-time money. It's just not a prudent way to try to deal with it. Now, I am going to work in trying to come up with something that will address raises, but that'll, in the terms of what I recommend, it's going to be money that'll be generated every year.
But will we have to borrow that money to come up with it?
No.
We'll come up with raises without borrowing the money.
That's what my goal is going to be, yes.
Okay. All right. I have a next question.
Okay?
The $75,000 for homeless, where's that going?
That will go to join with the city of Little Rock, who I understand has adopted their budget. We've sort of generally believed, and I think we've talked about this a time or two, we've generally believed that, that the cost of supporting an effort would be roughly 2/3 Little Rock and 1/3 North Little Rock. They're budgeted $200,000 for their effort, and it's essentially to create a center that would, a day center for homeless. That's the beginning part of it. It may, hopefully be enough to get it kicked off. Actually 2 years ago, it'd been August of '05, the council adopted Resolution 6803 that indicates that we felt that the city of North Little Rock joining with other communities to take care of our homeless is a worthwhile objective, and that we ought to try to accomplish that by 2015. Obviously, you can't do that without dollars. This is the first time that, I think we put this in last year too. We put $25,000 last year, but I don't believe we spent much of that. There has been a director that was hired, essentially being paid for by both cities, that is making recommendations. And one thing, Jimmy, I think is his first name, I'm trying to remember his last name, but I visited with him on several occasions, and he's working with both us and the city of Little Rock to create this essentially day center for the homeless. So this is where that money would go in support of that effort in accordance with that resolution. Now, again, let me just mention, I put that $75,000 in there, as again part of what our discussions were with the city of Little Rock before they had set their budget. They have now adopted their budget at $200,000. So, to be honest, it certainly, in keeping with at least what we are feeling ought to be a reasonable share of this effort, would be another $25,000. So I'm going to come back and ask the council for an additional $25,000 in supporting that overall effort. Now, we've got to, one of the things that we've found that happens, and this is why North Little Rock and Little Rock in large respect are partners on this, and that is if Little Rock does something of some consequence that makes it more difficult on the homeless, we seem to find some of those folks that want to more populate our side, and to a certain degree vice versa. So we for many years had the Union Rescue Mission, and we purchased that property, and then that closed down a year ago, 2 years ago. It's been fairly recent. And so, as we move forward, that's essentially what this effort is to make a real challenge to try to accomplish.
And this is part of that. We served on that committee, that 10-year plan to end homelessness, because I've represented the city on that. So it's a joint project.
Floor is open.
Just a comment on special appropriations. In '07, we had 22 categories. In '08, we have 23 categories. The new one seems to be the Keep North Little Rock Beautiful. And not opposition, no opposition, but
Hard for us not to keep it beautiful. We spend the money anyway. So
I understand that. But what I'm trying to say is that your total for 2008 is 19,000 less than it was for 2007, even though you have one additional category. And I noticed that the big difference in special appropriations falls into item 5976 with the administration of justice state. It's some $200,000, $215,000 less in '08 than it was in '07.
Alderman, that is based on, that's our fines that we collect through the courts. A certain percentage of the fines go to the state. And we had budgeted more money in all probability in the prior year, so we would have to, if we had more income from fines, more would go to the state.
Okay.
It's a certain percentage. It's been in effect for 15 years.
That's what the state, if I'm not mistaken, tells us we got to do, and so there's really no latitude over that.
Okay, all right.
That's correct.
And the other thing I noticed too is the City Beautiful budget was reduced from 25,000 in '07 to 20,000 in '08, and since there seems to be 19,000 less for appropriations in '08 than there was in '07, we're questioning that. Is that a typo, Mayor?
I'm sure it is, Alderman. We'll find another 5,000. Thank you.
Mayor, quick question while we have Mr. Sisson. My recollection is our jail bond should be paid off at either this year or at this point.
It was paid off last year. We had enough money in escrow to pay it, so it is completely paid off now.
Okay, so
To help you answer a question, I think based on our understanding with the county, they still have another year or two under the interlocal that they have some, we'll say, possessory interest in that, although, the financial part of it's gone, but, the lease still says they have another year or two, but I'm assured by the county that if there's anything that we would want to do with that, they would be more than happy to work with us, because right now, obviously, it's sitting vacant. Now, I don't know if I presupposed a question, but you're right, it has been paid off. But
that's kind of where I was going. I was wondering.
Well, the reason, even though it's paid off, we really haven't had any we don't receive a boost in revenue because the county has been making those payments for us. So,
I understand.
There's no new money there because it's been paid off. We have not been paying on that for a number of years now,
Right.
15 maybe, or
Almost that much, yes. They've made the payments.
Well, again, I just recalled, I know our property room is full to the brim, and office space is a premium in the police operations area.
It's there, and I'm sure that if we had anything that, Chief's not up there, ready to pounce and move over there, I'm aware of, so that's a jail, and, if he finds a way to use it, I'm sure we could find a way to, depending on the cost, to try to support that, but at this point, of course, you remember, you heard me discussing, and this would be, another discussion for next year, about, perhaps a 1/4 cent sales tax for the city to reopen that jail. Now, that's not off the table by any means. We're going to continue to try to work with the other jurisdictions to see if, because of this 3 or 4 month delay, because I was told by Mr. Carter that we couldn't get it on the ballot in as rapid a time as I was hopeful that the council might consider doing that. That's still not off the table, and that jail would be, one of the first things, if we passed it and no one else did, that I would think that we might want to consider.
Thank you.
Need a motion to adopt the budget?
I guess.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought somebody else was going to discuss something. I
Yeah.
want to talk, go ahead.
I'd like to move that we adopt the budget.
There's a second? We can still talk.
Yeah, okay.
Second.
All right. Further discussion?
Yeah, the 200,000 for the riverfront development, what is that for?
You know, it could be for a variety of things. Right now, you know, there's some real estate that several portions of real estate that we don't own. There's one that's owned by General Properties that's immediately downriver from the Junction Bridge. That probably will be one of the first things that, you know, I'm going to ask the council to look at. I've been talking to the Matthews folks about, you know, acquiring that. There is some more property that is adjacent to that Daniel Printing owns, so that's a possibility. You know, this is another one of those things that I certainly wouldn't do anything there in terms of allocating that without the council's authorization. You know, we perhaps are going to have some more money that we need to allocate in matching respects. I know I've been talking to Judge Valines. We're looking at having some stairs that come off of the Junction Bridge that aren't under the ambit of the Facilities Board that will come both into our riverfront park as well as into on the levee side of the seawall. So that's a possibility. You know, I hope that, and we've been working on moving the HOGA. We still have that issue to face and try to make, you know, some decisions on that. There is some, you know, a variety of things that have to do with riverfront. That more than eats up the 200,000, but you know, it could be those, all of them, or none of them.
So, our drainage fund this year, I mean, we had $50,000 and we were like putting Band-Aids on things. Could this possibly be reduced and put into the different wards' drainage funds?
I mean, obviously, the council can do what they want to with this.
And we could do a lot with $25,000 in Ward 1.
Well, again, and I, you know, I certainly, no, I understand.
Yeah, I know, I was Murray's
And the one thing that we are committed to doing, and that is certainly working, you know, at one point we had, you know, there was actually no drainage fund for a long time. And then when we had our capital penny, we started allocating some money into that. So, you know, for a long time around here, there was no drainage fund. You know, we certainly remain committed to trying to address drainage projects and finding, you know, doing what we can to find, you know, those dollars whenever a critical project comes up. So, you know, I mean, the answer is yes. You know, obviously the council has the authority to deal with it. I would, you know, I'd certainly suggest to you at this point that, you know, we move, at least I would hope we would move forward in trying to address your needs as those needs come about and see what we can do with adding to the budget or reallocating some dollars if we need to. I would hope that we are able to keep the dollars that have been recommended the same, but if you have some things that need to be done, as we've done in the past, you know, we'll do everything we can and have been fairly successful in finding ways to do things.
So by doing this, or by, what do you mean by reallocating?
Well, when the project
Reduce
itself,
this?
when the project itself speaks, I would oppose, you know, reallocating any of this.
We have so many little projects, it's hard to come, you know, so would we come back each time on small projects? You know, we may have a $5,000 project, a $6,000 project, so will we be able to find that funds?
We'll make every effort to do that. Yes, we will.
Okay, that's a deal.
This is a starting point.
That's right.
Mike Smith heard that.
Mike Smith did hear that. Okay.
Debbie, in defense of the mayor and his ability to make things happen when funds seem limited, we had a project over on Pike Avenue that's ongoing at the present time that both the city engineer and myself and was at wit's end as to how we could address that problem with the limited amount of funds we have available. I was recommending that we use block grant funds, but apparently it was brought to the attention of the mayor, and the mayor handled it expeditiously, and we're in the process of getting it done at this time, and it didn't cost the ward anything from the drainage fund.
And
so if the need is there, we'll get it done.
The one thing, and I don't really mean to try to suggest that we need to come through, my office on everything, but, we have been, very, I guess, so to speak, successful in really dealing with things that need to be done. I mean, we come in and amend budget, or we do things on a fairly quickly and rapid basis, and if we need to, then we'll come up and address it at the council. So rest assured, we're not going to let, things that need to happen go unaddressed.
This would be the one.
One of the things that we're wondering about, it says reinstate unused 2007 appropriation, and for Ward 2 is $37,420. So we have the $37,420 plus
55.
the $55,000.
Plus the 55,000, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay, that's.
That would be what we had, at the time we did, it was on 11/21, that was what
Okay.
had not been allocated.
Not been allocated.
But we're not losing those funds.
No, sir, you will not lose those funds. Those are always, the drainage funds are always added back to
Okay.
the 55,000 you're getting.
Okay. So that give us like $92,420 for Ward 2.
Yes, ma'am, that'd be correct. Now, I don't know if there's anything been written by y'all and Mike between then, but that was what was as of that time, yes.
Okay.
Well, I mean, just to give you an example, you and I talked about, Ms. Ross, you and I talked about the need for the signalization of those two intersections, McCain and North Hills, and that's in the budget, if I'm not mistaken. I talked to
That's going
Mr.
to be
Marvin.
In the 2007, we amended.
Excuse me?
That's on the amended budget coming
It's
up.
on the amended budget, that's right. So, I mean, when we work with the council and trying to determine what needs to be done, we try to address that, and we didn't put it in next year's budget. We went ahead and asked Mr. Marvin to order the equipment and to get it moving so that we'd be able to address that the first part of next year. Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me, signaling device for?
Pedestrian signalization of two intersections. Now, if you got some intersections that need it, we'll sure.
We definitely have some.
Well, somehow I figured that might be out there. Yeah.
You said you opened a can of
Well, no,
worms.
but I mean, we do. I mean, we try to. I mean, I think if we weren't able to, there'd be a good reason, but we make every effort to try to do that, yeah? This is for pedestrians, so.
We got
We got a lot of signalization. Part of, this is back, and I appreciate the question, but, we've got a lot of signalizing that's going on at state expense going down East Broadway, and that'll be well underway. So we're gonna have to live with the inconvenience of construction, but that's obviously no way around that. So the Highway Department, just to bring you up, a little bit up to speed, the Highway Department should be letting that contract January or February for the second half of that East Broadway project, in the very near future. So all of those will be enhanced, but we need to make sure that they are what the community wants.
I'm almost reluctant to bring this up, but I feel like we need to say something about it, or I need to share it with the council. Maybe I'm the only one that's aware of it, and it's certainly a significant amount of money laying out there. $194,000 is remaining in a bond issue of some sort that was approved back.
It's a
2004.
For fire hydrants and berm, that's right. So
And
still-
my partner up here, Alderman Gaines.
Ross, you might want to listen to this.
I
This
am
might-
heard 194,000.
Yeah, and 15,000 of that we spent over on Linnell Drive in Ward 3, thanks to Alderman Gaines and myself, and there's still a lot of money on the table, and it can only be used for one specific purpose, or purposes. It can't be used for stoplights and signalizations and so forth. So I would think it would be prudent on our part, before this money becomes unavailable after some time frame, to have our city engineers and our fire department determine where we could utilize the money best in installing fire hydrants so that we don't have a shortage when we have churches burning down and apartment complexes. I know Ward 4 had to put in a fire hydrant up on McCain after that apartment fire. And I don't know where the funds came from for that particular incident, but just wanted to let y'all know that we've got a lot of money out there for fire hydrants, and there's been no action taken to use it.
Yes, ma'am?
Under City Beautiful, we reduced that this year from 25,000 to 20,000.
I
because we
really don't
moved-
remember that, Mr. Sisson. I don't.
We've
you know.
got 2 new groups this year that are going to be very active. I know we've got some from the Lakewood Northeast that's probably going to
When-
want to be doing something, and
When we were doing the budget, they had about 10,000 that was not spent, and that's why it was reduced.
Okay.
It
But I-
may be spent all now, but it was not spent then. That's the reason.
Well, let me just,
But
I
it's
mean,
been-
We talking about City Beautiful money? It was all spent this year in
it
2007.
really
Apparently
needs
it's
to
been in
be up.
November. They are.
Actually, there's 3 groups that are, new groups that are going to be vying for funds.
We'll
I
spend
mean,
it
that'll
all
be the-
next year.
That'll be the first amendment we propose, you know, because I sure don't intend to have, you know, that. I think that now that Mr. Sisson reminds me that there was $10,000 that hadn't been spent.
It has
and,
been
You know,
now.
I guess it's been gone, it's
been
gone
spent.
now, so.
Mr. Scott can verify that, right, Mr. Scott?
Yes.
All right, well, we'll find it.
So do we need to amend that now? Or we do it all, do we need to amend that now or do it all at one time? or-
Let's do it at one time, because we got a balanced budget right now, and I'm not sure, you know, what would be the way to, I mean, we'd have to raise a projection, I think, and I'm sure we could deal with the sales tax, but, you know, the easiest way would, you know, to me, just either that or do it over the general fund if you wanted to. I guess, if you want to do it now, that's fine, but
If it's okay, with y'all, we'll remember that, and we will,
All right.
we will allow them to go over 5,000 if that's the will of you.
Oh, no, we want more than that.
excuse me?
We want more than
She wants a
5,000.
little
Only
more than
five.
that. We'll-
Oh, I really, seriously, we want more than
you know,
5,000.
We'll take it.
We'll work with you.
Okay.
All right.
Oh, go ahead,
Alderman
Dale's turn.
Gaines.
We'll alternate.
Mayor, you alleviated a lot of my concerns earlier when we were walking in. And North Hills Development, they had 3 questions, and we're not very many. The 2 million, will we later on be putting more in there? Because you said it wasn't a commitment, just something you thought you ought to do. So I misunderstood, I guess. You
No,
didn't make a commitment.
No, you know, the only commitment I'd make is working with this council to try to see what we could do, as much as we could do for the off-site road work for that development. And, you know, the cost estimate has gone from 6 to 9 million, you know, this 2 million. Again, you know, I mean, the lawsuit could be successful. I don't think so, you know, but if something should happen that would, you know, divert that project, you know, then obviously we're not going to go forward with that. And I don't intend to go forward with it until, you know, we have something to bring to this council that you'd get to say specifically as to yes or no on terms of what that would be. So, you know, all this would be is essentially an indication that the council supports that and supports going forward, or that project goes forward. The other, obviously, is somewhat the same, although I do see us moving into those dollars perhaps quicker.
Over in Barron Cross?
Uh-huh.
That, you indicated to me that people, I think we misunderstood you, or the newspaper did last meeting. You would go ahead with this appropriation without the development. You want to do the roundabout anyway, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm inclined to move forward on the roundabout. Now, the extension of 9th Street, you know, would perhaps be a little bit different, but I think, I have little doubt that Rockwater Village is going forward, but, you know, this roundabout, you know, in my mind is needed, you know, even without that. This thing would make it, as we further develop River Road, you know, what's bad now would become impossible, so I think this ought to move forward, you know, irrespective of Rockwater Village, but I have little doubt that will be moving forward too.
Okay, what about the 15 million, and is it going to be a line of credit? You talked about borrowing?
That's essentially what we're going to be asking, and in fact, you know, that's what we're going to be asking the council, that we are able to get a line of credit, and we only access that if we, you know, if we need to. If the hydro doesn't flow like it's supposed to, or if the rates don't produce what they should, and what I'm more inclined to believe is that this may be more of a cash flow problem when we consume, you know, roughly 40 to 50% of our power, you know, and that'll end somewhere in August, perhaps September next year. The hydro plant may not have generated all of what it ought to by that time, but we'll feel like we ought to have a good chance of catching up by the end of the year. Because if you'll remember, this year, even though we're at 9 million now and projecting 12 million and some change for next year, you know, we only had the higher rates on the hydro income for 9 months of this year. We didn't have them for all 12 months. Pretty sure I'm right on that, right, Mr. Gertz? And so, you know, and then of the lower rates, the first 3 months, those are usually better flow months than otherwise. The second thing, about 2 to 3 months of this year, you'll remember an exceptional year in terms of water in Oklahoma and too much water in Oklahoma. There were 2 to 3 months we generated between high water and some mechanical issues. There were probably 2 to 3 months that we received little to no credit out of the hydro plant. So, you know, we feel like that 12 million and change is a pretty reasonable projection.
Okay. People where I live are really concerned about, as I told you beforehand, which Alderman Ross alluded to, there's drainage, opening the jail, like to have a substation in Amboy. We talked about that earlier. It's just a difference of how we look at things. Most of them, you know, we're opposed to some of the riverfront development, the Junction Bridge, things like that. So, you know, we spent a lot of time on the house on Southwind, and perhaps not as much time. I guess everybody here studied it in the past few weeks and everything. But I'm for everything you're doing. There's a couple of things in here, and just simply, I'm being a minority, and I know that and I understand that, but I'm gonna go ahead and not vote for the budget, but I know it'll be a minority because there's just some things for people where I live and what we want to do are just a little bit different. We've had a good year and the councils work together well, but I just have a different philosophy right now, opinion. That's all. Thank you.
Ms. Ross?
One more thing. Promise. Under youth programs, the $110,000 for youth programs, 50 of that is for city year. I know where everything else, you know, we've been cutting back and everything, and we increased city year by $10,000.
Mm-hmm.
Is there some special reason why we increased that when everything else was, you know, pretty much held?
The answer is yes. You know, those we have about, I think there's somewhere between 10 and 15 young people that not only work at 7th Street, that's the principal place that they are housed, but they fan out in virtually all the elementary schools of the city in supporting, you know, that level of our, you know, of our youth, I guess you could say. You know, that's been the same amount for the last 4 to 5 years, if I remember how long we've been involved in City Year, that the city has put in. We have not added to that, nor have we in the past supported any of the additional fundraising that they go through. And obviously, as you well know, costs increase pretty much on an annual basis, and those kids come in and literally spend, virtually a year in doing a variety of community projects. So I felt like the additional $10,000 that was requested was justified in this case. Alderwoman Robinson?
Well, my comment on it, I don't think it's enough, because it's a prevention program, and City Year, they're working with a couple of schools, in my ward, and are working with some kids that are at risk. So I think that they do a good job, and I don't think enough money is in prevention as far as programs for our youth. So I'm in agreement with $110,000. I don't want that amount cut, because like I said, I don't think it's enough. And I can see the difference that City Year has made in the lives of some of the children that they've worked with. And it's a great program. And like I said, they're making a difference in the lives of some of the kids in my ward. And they're working at several of the schools, with these kids.
Any further discussion on the motion?
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
No.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
Witcher?
Yes.
On the emergency, Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
No.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
And Witcher?
Yes.
New business?
Yeah, we've dealt with all old business. New business, please call it.
Resolution 07140, Mayor Hayes.
Please call it.
A resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to accept the donation of certain property from Stuart L. Fred and John L. Gilbert.
I move for adoption.
Second.
On the motion.
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Height? And Witcher?
Yes.
Resolution 07141, Mayor Hayes.
Please call it.
A resolution appropriating a one-time payment of $307,492 from the 2007 General Fund to provide monies to the Pulaski County for the 2008 operations of the Pulaski County Regional Detention Facility.
Move for adoption.
Is there a second?
Second.
This is pretty well the way we pay for our jail, at least we have in the past, and so we're just, I guess, doing it because we did it last year this way, on the motion.
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
And Witcher?
Yes.
Resolution 07-142, Mayor Hayes.
Please call it.
A resolution authorizing acceptance of a settlement offer from Imperial Fire and Casualty Insurance Company in regard to property damage caused by its insured.
Want me to explain that?
Let's get a motion.
Move for adoption.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, you want to,
Basically, somebody ran into damaged some of our property and hit somebody else along the way. Insurance coverage is maxing out. Right, so their insurance company is paying completely what their coverage limits are and prorating between us and the other person. This is a little bit less than the damage that we actually sustained, but it's the maximum that their insurance pays.
any other questions on the motion?
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines? Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
And Witcher?
Yes.
Let me go back real quick, Mr. Carter. Let's make sure, because I know the gift of the land was, they wanted to ensure that took place this year. So we have a deed prepared. Are we going to be able to file it?
I've been in communication with their attorney today, and it should be en route. They were just waiting for this boot to hit the floor, and then
I just
it'll
want to
be
make
en
sure
route.
we're ready to follow through with what they're interested in doing, and that's ensuring that the gift is consummated this year, is my understanding.
Their attorney's out of Texas, Brian, I can't remember his last name, seemed like a nice guy, and he's ready to work with us, and
Yeah,
we'll
just
make it
sure that
happen.
we're ready to file it if that needs to be done.
We'll make it happen.
Thank you. All right, next item.
Mayor?
I'm sorry.
Just a comment, and it doesn't have anything to do with this, but it has to do with somebody destroying the bus shelter bench at McCain and JFK. Did that happen last night? When I drove to work this morning, I happened to notice it had been destroyed. Just
You got me.
Did anybody report that?
Patrick, you want to come up? You don't know anything about it. I see a bunch of heads nodding, and somebody told me about it. I'm sure. Wait. Stephanie, do you know something? Okay, we all know it happened. Now, if anybody knows anything more and know it happened, then tell us about it. But if not, we'll contact. I know the city paid for that to be done, and so we'll look into it. I was told the same, that this happened today, and I'm sure Central Arkansas Transit's been notified, and we'll try to see. Chief, would you check and see if there's a police report about anything taking place up there, or is this a hit and run? And let us know tomorrow. All right, back to,
Ordinance 07-134, Mayor Hayes.
please call it.
This is an ordinance amending the 2007 budget ordinance number 7889, first reading.
Move to suspend the rules and place it on its second reading.
Is there a second? On the motion?
Bryant? Ross?
Yes.
Robinson? Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
And Witcher?
Yes.
An ordinance amending the 2007 budget ordinance number 7889, second reading.
Move to suspend the rules and place it on its third reading.
Second.
On the motion?
Bryant? Ross?
Yes.
Robinson? Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
And Witcher?
Yes.
An ordinance amending the 2007 budget ordinance number 7889, third and final reading.
Mr.
Move for
Sisson, you
adoption.
want to just to go ahead real quickly and tell us?
There's only a few amendments on the general fund. On the code enforcement, we needed 20 more thousand for demolition of buildings. We need to tear down a few more buildings. And on the sanitation, 70,000 was added to the landfill. On the street department, on traffic, we added 55,000, which was crosswalks for North Hills and McCain and JFK and McCain. We were going to bring this into a special appropriation, but since we were amending the budget, we left it that way. On the sales tax, there we added 190,000 to pay for police cameras. This is surveillance cameras, and if the chief is here, if someone wants more detail on that. But we paid for the money out of removing from railroad crossings. We put the railroad crossing back in next year's budget, sir. that is, all of them, the Parks and Recreation shifted some money around, but it was only between their different departments, so there was no additional money coming into parks. It was this was a very few amendments. We started not to even have an amendment, but because those two last things.
Chief, while we're on this, you want to just come up? I know you've given me a summary of your timetable on your police cameras. We brought a resolution to the council about a year ago asking whether the council would support this, and they did unanimously. So this is the implementation, essentially, of that resolution. You want to give us a little summary on what, at least our initial venture into this camera operation will show us, and when we're likely to see some things?
Yes, sir. If you recall, the original design was to have a prototype system in the downtown area, primarily in the area from along Main Street, Maple Street, Broadway to and south to the river. We've also included in the backbone of the system the ability to go out east and also west. And in this initial package, I think there's 8 cameras downtown. There's one camera that's scheduled to go, we added to go out east. There's one camera on the west side, but the system is designed so that we can add as many cameras as we want to. I'm told the additional cost is about $5,000 per camera, plus about $5,000 in additional backbone for each 5 new cameras that you add, and that can vary depending on where they are, because without getting too technical, because I can't get too technical about it, but I'm told that the way the system works is kind of like a web, so that as you build cameras out, they work off of each other to transmit the signal back. It's going to work on a radio signal fed back to the city fiber. So it's a system that we can expand. We'll also incorporate, of course, all of the cameras can be moved, but we'll incorporate some cameras that are more easily mobile. So I think this is something that, if we're satisfied with the initial project, that we can build out not only east but west into some of the areas where we feel it would be the most benefit.
Is there a possibility we get some grant money to get more of those cameras? Because I know we surely need them in our area. Is there any grant money available for that kind of?
I'm not aware of any right now, Mr. Thomas, but we can certainly look.
Well, the other thing, though, Alderman, again, we seem to be, when it comes to, $5,000 a camera plus backbone of $5,000 for 5 cameras, what was that?
Approximately, I'm told, the cameras, each additional camera that you add away from the center is about $5,000 per camera, and for each additional 5 cameras, you have about another $5,000 in.
So let me ask
$6,000 roughly.
So let me ask this question.
Tops.
So for 5,000 plus 25,000, so a total of 30,000, we could add 5 more cameras.
Yes.
5,000 per
Yes.
camera with 5,000, and then so you could do that in increments generally.
Yes.
Now, why don't you also give us a little bit of a clue on where we are with our eye in the sky, our eyes in the sky? I think many of you probably heard about the police department working with potential grant. We've got some FAA issues, Federal Aviation Administration, about acquiring 2 helicopters, remote control helicopters.
Right, that came about, if I could just take a moment and explain how that came about. The department applied for a grant to fight violent crime, and a part of that grant, we included the technology of these drones, for lack of a better word, unmanned aerial vehicles. It's not like the Predator that you see on TV flying over in Iraq, but they're about, 5 feet long, and they have cameras mounted on them. Very sophisticated technology. We decided in applying for this grant to include that, and it's cutting edge. And actually, in the end, this grant was approved within 2 months by the Department of Justice. And in the end, I think it was actually the adding of that technology that got us the grant so quickly, because we're on the forefront, and they're looking for departments that's willing to test new technology and find new ways to fight crime. Our intent in this is certainly to use for some tactical situations, but there are some areas in town that you're all aware of that
we have a lot of police presence, but anything that we can do to get a better view of what's going on in those areas, I think will provide better public safety. And we're just looking for new ways to help make North Little Rock safer. Hopefully, you
had Council Member Alderman Witcher.
Chief, a couple of quick comments. I know Mr. Parker and I spent a couple hours recently with several distributors of equipment, camera equipment. So the questions I'll ask is, part of it I'll have an idea, and part of it I'll just be hitting in the dark. Of the new cameras that you're installing, how many of them are fixed, and how many of them have the capability to move around at the intersection that you're looking at? Or are they all, can they all rotate?
You mean in terms of rotating on the
Yes.
fixed location?
Yes.
All of them will be able to rotate, pan, zoom, tilt. Obviously, based upon the location of where they'll be set, there can be some differences in the zoom capability of the camera, depending on what area we're expecting it to cover. But I think they all will be able to control all of them in terms of zooming and actually moving the camera.
Okay, and I guess an information session again that we sat in dealt with multiple groups within the city having access to those units through facilities. For instance, I guess the 911, they mentioned specifically the 911 center. If there was a call for help, they could turn the camera on in that area and view what was occurring, and they could send other equipment before it was actually called for to a site. Do we have any expectations of being able to do anything like that?
We can give access to the cameras to anyone that we want to have access.
Okay.
Any other questions from the chief? I just wanted to bring him up on this budget amendment as we are using some funds that were in this year's budget, I think directed toward the silencing our crossings. We still have that money in next year's budget, but that's what we're recommending.
Just one more question. I think probably all of us feel as though you've placed the priority on the area that needs it first, and that we want everyone to feel safe downtown and comfortable between the venues we have down here and the new establishments. I know from a personal standpoint, and it's almost selfish, with the many shopping areas that we have on McCain, if there are any expectations of it at some point down the line, perhaps doing some work down in that area also.
And certainly, the system we bid the system that would be expandable, and certainly expandable to most all of the city. If we go north, and this is purely having to do with the terrain, my understanding is if we go north across I-40, there's some additional backbone work that we'll have to do just because of the terrain there. Basically, from downtown going east and going up west on Pike Avenue, it's basically flat. So you don't have the interference problem. But certainly, yes, that's doable, and it was our desire in getting a proposal out is something that we could build on if the city decided it's something they liked and we wanted to expand.
Okay. Are we doing this on a Wi-Fi system, and are we building it ourselves, or are we piggybacking on someone else's Wi-Fi system?
Now, we have got a vendor that is well experienced, has done multiple city systems coming in to build out the system. It's based on a licensed radio frequency that feeds back to the city fiber. So, I mean, my understanding, and again, I'm not a technician on this, but it's my understanding that one of the things we did not want is to use an unlicensed frequency, because you end up with interference And I know of other cities that have expressed to me that they ended up with a camera system that had that interference. So this is, I'm told, a frequency that is licensed to law enforcement.
Thank you,
One
Chief.
thing I wanted to mention, Alderman, is you know, a bit of different character as we move north in terms of our shopping, because most of that, if not virtually all of it's on private property. And while what we're doing down here, you know, in terms of challenges with certain areas as well as our streets are virtually all on our property, and not that we couldn't, you know, address that, but we have to be, there are perhaps some legal issues that we've got to resolve, but once we start doing work on private property, you know, it's a difficult door to close again, and I don't know whether, you know, what kind of issues we'd have to deal with that. I would imagine if we want to put a bunch of cameras up at McCain Mall, they probably would say okay. But that's one of the challenges as we move through this camera issue is there's so much more private property, you know, in terms of shopping than there upriver, we'll say, or uptown, than there is downtown. So I know that's a whole new you know, set of issues that we have to deal with.
And Mayor, I realize we have those issues, but that's also where a good chunk of our revenue, sales tax revenue comes from. And we need to protect that.
You know, I'm not saying not to explore it, but there's additional hurdle that we'll have to, you know, try to resolve as we try to move into private property if we choose to.
Mayor, I think you asked for a timeline. If I could give you a timeline, the original proposal called for completion by March 1 on the camera system downtown, and the vendor tells us they think they can still meet that because we were delayed. We ended up having to do the request for proposals twice, so we were a bit delayed on our end. But I think that at this point they're saying they can still meet that. So it's our desire to have it up and running, but by the time we have the NCAA tournament here. And the helicopter, we're still probably 30 days out on getting our budget approved by the Department of Justice on that.
What about your FAA issues? I thought that
FAA issues are something that we're working on, and it's going to be a stepped process that's probably going to take a number of months as progressively as we get experience with it.
Thank you very much. Where are we, Miss? There's a motion to adopt on the amendment of the budget. I'm sorry.
Just one more question, and I've used my questions. On the general license, we're almost $500,000 short on general license in 2007. Is there some
Is
reason?
this on the new budget or this budget?
On this one that we're looking at, the 07.
It was short, I guess we just missed the guess. I've asked
Just
Mr.
to
Reagan.
get, I was just
lower.
wondering if it was a guess or if we raised it so much that other people went to other cities to get their
No,
license,
I
or?
don't think we lost any. You know, sometimes when you make a guess at how much it increased, we increased it to a certain percent of Little Rocks, and it just didn't get there.
Okay, but we're collecting all that we're supposed to be collecting, okay.
Yeah, I hadn't heard anybody left or any significant.
Thought that was our employee raises. I was trying to find it. Okay.
Have we attached
We'll keep looking.
Mayor, I guess I've got one question, if it has to do with the budget.
Of this budget or the
Yeah.
new budget?
Well, the new budget.
Well, why don't we get finished with this?
Okay,
This
all right.
is amending the existing budget. Okay? All right, where are we?
It's been read 3 times, but you need to amend the budget itself into the ordinance.
Okay, yeah. Mr. Sissons, you know, I think y'all have that
Okay.
distributed. If I could get that amended in, the attachment.
Second.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion
No.
on the motion?
Bryant? Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines? Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
And Witcher?
Yes, move for adoption as amended.
Second.
Motion?
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
And Witcher?
Yes.
On the emergency, Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
And Witcher?
Yes.
Alderman Height, if we could just get through,
That's-
you know, a couple of things. I know we've got a good banker here that's given us an excellent rate.
I'll save it to the comments after.
Thank you. Next item,
Ordinance 07-135, Mayor Hayes.
please call it.
This is an ordinance authorizing the issue of a promissory note to provide short-term financing under Amendment Number 78 to the Arkansas Constitution for improvements for the North Little Rock Parks and Recreation Department, providing for the payment of the principal of and interest on the note, and prescribing other matters pertaining thereto. First reading.
Move to suspend the rules and place it on the second reading.
Second.
On the motion?
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
And Witcher?
Yes.
An ordinance authorizing the issue of a promissory note to provide short-term financing under Amendment Number 78 to the Arkansas Constitution for improvements for the North Little Rock Parks and Recreation Department, providing for the payment of the principal of and interest on the note, and prescribing other matters pertaining thereto. Second reading.
Move to suspend the rules and place it on its third reading.
Second.
On the motion?
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
And Witcher?
Yes.
An ordinance authorizing the issue of a promissory note to provide short-term financing under Amendment Number 78 to the Arkansas Constitution for improvements for the North Little Rock Parks and Recreation Department, providing for the payment of the principal of and interest on the note, and prescribing other matters pertaining thereto. Third and final reading.
Alderman Witcher, do you have anything?
Oh, well, we need to amend it.
Huh?
Do we have the amendments?
We need to amend it.
We have some blanks.
35.
We got some blanks.
I'm
I don't
sorry.
see
Mr.
any blanks.
What are you talking about?
On the agreements.
Mr. Sisson, we got any blanks we need to fill in?
I think it's ready,
Just talking about this.
unless, I know the lawyers have been in communication today.
I think we can adopt it in its present form. We're fine. There are blanks in the exhibits, but that's illustrative of the agreements that we intend to enter into. We can adopt it as it is.
All right.
You don't have to interject who it's with? We don't have to put in who the bank is that we're borrowing the money from?
Normally, like anytime that we follow a bid process,
This is a result of, we've already bid,
Right, if it's-
bid this.
we only come back, we won't waive
Mr.
bid.
Sisson, why don't you introduce Mr. Cook?
I think everybody knows Mr. Cook.
Everybody
but he
knows
did-
Donnie Cook,
he did-
longtime resident of the city, and what's our rate, Mr. Cook? 3.16 or?
No, sir, Mayor, the rate was 3.18%.
1.8, well, I was
Yeah,
close.
as I told Mr. Sisson when we were at the bid conference, I think we did a typo. There was transposition, but we were going to honor our 3.18. No, I'm really serious that.
Can we get some more then at that rate, or?
Absolutely, Mayor. With this council and with you as the mayor, we have all the confidence in the world in you to pay this back, so.
Great rate.
Well, it is a great rate, and we sure appreciate your competitiveness. I think we had rates in the 4+ range, so, 3.18 is we appreciate, you just don't have your Santa Claus outfit on, Mr. Cook.
Well, I'm honored to be here, Mayor, especially in front of you, and the way our company judges how we give out interest rates is based on the credibility of the organization, so that speaks well of all of you.
Well, and we appreciate you.
And, Mayor, if I may take a moment of personal privilege, Captain Bradley talking about putting up cameras to provide safety for the community, it seems to me as a business person here in this community and all over the state, there may be an opportunity once he determines whether this is successful, maybe the business community may want to help purchase some of these cameras to put them in areas where we see there's beneficial opportunity. I'm not speaking necessarily on behalf of Bank of America, but I can certainly see lots of merits to looking in areas where we all deal with crime and saying, if we know the city has limited funds, maybe the business community could go out and purchase cameras with you in partnership and put them in an area, or even maybe a community group or a neighborhood association. I mean, when you're talking about $25,000, that's not an insurmountable amount of money to bring safety to a neighborhood. And it just seems to me, all of us that live in this city want to do that, and I just would challenge all of you to think outside the box sometimes rather than keep trying to find money yourself. Just ask the business community to help when it makes sense. So.
Well, I know that I had a chance to come to a meeting, I guess that Lunsford Bridges called about a year ago when we had a rash of bank robberies, and I certainly wouldn't mind, and I was concerned when I brought this camera issue for the council as to whether people would think it would be an invasion of privacy. It was shortly after the bombing that occurred in London in the transportation system, and they have cameras apparently all over that city. I would support, something like that, and obviously this council took a step tonight, and with the network that Chief Bradley is talking about building, it's certainly something with our, with the kind of partnership that we've had with the business community, and certainly we appreciate you and Bank of America, that might very well move in seeing that happens.
Well, as you know, I was born and raised in this town. I've lived here 55 some odd years, and I hope to be here another 55, so.
We hope you are too.
Happy New Year, all.
Thank you.
I move the rules be suspended and placed on second reading.
Actually, it's already been read 3 times.
Oh, it has been?
So move for
I'm
adoption.
sorry.
Second.
Motion made and seconded that we adopt on the motion.
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
And Witcher?
Yes.
On the emergency, Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
And Witcher?
Yes.
We're going to work with the Parks and Rec Commission as well as the council to ensure that these dollars, and obviously there are more of them because of the good interest rate, that goes toward projects that we all have a consensus that we are enthused about. Some are necessary. I know I'm talking to, Mr. Rhodes and that roost for several of our community centers. Perhaps not all of them, but some work may need to be done in most all of them. Our baseball activity out in the new fields we're building, additional tennis courts, and as we move forward the expenditure of these funds, we certainly will make sure everybody has an opportunity to address, the priorities of what they're being going to be used for. So we appreciate the support of the council, and Bob, we look forward to working with you and the commission and ensuring some things are continued to be done that make our park system the best in the country. Next item.
Ordinance 07-136, Mayor Hayes.
Please call it.
An ordinance granting a conditional use to allow an auto accessories installation business in a C3 zone for certain real property located at 3701 JFK Boulevard. And I just did Linda's job, I'm sorry.
All right.
I'm moving us on.
Let's go.
First reading.
There, Mr. Voiles in here. Sean, do you want to tell us, generally how this came over from the council? I mean, from the commission.
This is for auto accessories business. We ran at the corner there previously, approximately 2 years ago. If you remember, you had a auto detail shop come through at the same as a special use. As you all know, special use is a use that's not allowed by the zoning ordinance, and they have to come before you. In this case, the zoning ordinance allows auto accessories with conditions. And so they came before the Planning Commission to get a list of conditions. He's agreed to it. The applicant is here if you have any questions. He's agreed to the conditions set by the Planning Commission, and we've sent it up to City Council for your review.
All right, you want to identify yourself and just briefly, because I think there is some concern about this legislation, so feel free to come to the microphone. If you filled out a card, sir, if you would, identify yourself, fill the card out, and leave it with Ms. Whitby after you have a chance to both say hello and share a few things with us.